Well, part two of the sun. I'm just going to clear up some bits and pieces because I've probably said the main parts of it, particularly when we looked at the shamanic illness. That covered a lot of it because that kind of crisis, which is what it is, it's a crisis of the East. It's a crisis of something new trying to come in. We can go through this whole thing. And we may not know what it is. Sometimes we do know. It's like it's this thing to be claimed. We may not be ready for it. Yeah. Sometimes we know where we're going. We know there's these qualities, these gifts in us, but we're not ready. It's like the old has to be demolished. We might think we're ready, but we're not. And it's like the spirit knows. So sometimes these times of change, of crisis, of illness even, they can go on and on. They can go on for years. I mean, I spent about 3 years. Anything I tried to do just seemed to, it just didn't work. Yeah, it always just went to pot. Unless I listened to this other thing, the shamanic voice. But even then, that was slow. That took its time. That had its own course. We're not in charge. That's what it showed me. We're not in charge. This is one of the great learnings that we get from the East, because this is where spirit comes in. It feeds into the rest of the wheel. In some way, it comes in at the East and it goes round, or it feeds in at the East and it goes straight across. You could look at it like that as well. Because opposite the East, fire, is West, which is earth, which is body, which is incarnation. So it's spirit coming into matter, and it's outside of our control. Spirit events are outside of our control. Earth events are outside of our control. Our body, we have 2 arms, 2 legs, we're human. We didn't choose that. We didn't choose to be born. We won't choose our moment of death, probably. We won't choose when we get ill. And similarly with these spirit events. This is called the blue road across the middle of the wheel. And it's great. I love it. It's the axis of fate. Yeah? And running from north to south is the axis of free will, where we do have choice, because you see, that's mind and feeling. Yeah. And we have much more ability to maneuver to hold ourselves there. Yeah? And that will then prepare the ground, the east-west, so that when spirit does come in, there's more fertile ground because of the work we've done with ourselves. But we'll come to that when we cover the north and south. But I just wanted to say a bit more about the nature of these crises. You get them delineated in psychosynthesis, which is a sort of slightly Jungian psychotherapy school. A guy called Saggioli. Yeah, he was around the time of Jung. But he has this thing called the self, capital S, a bit like Jung. It's transpersonal, and at certain times in life, a new element of self. It's time for a new element of self, capital S, to be born. But the old has to readjust itself, because when a new element of self is born, it's not an add-on, it's a new center. Like I talked in the first shamanic illness episode about a shift in authority. There's a new center to us, and everything has to be arranged. Our whole life has to be rearranged around that. And of course, that is often a crisis. And then eventually, we know what it is we have to do, what it is we have to accept, what it is we have to live from. In some ways, it's like, I can't carry on living like this. Yeah? We can get driven to that point. This is what Pluto, if you're an astrologer, that's how he works. It's like you just go, I can't live like this anymore. And so you don't. You finally stop. And then something new can happen when you stop doing that. It's a tremendous relief. You can see these periods of change happening sometimes when the energy starts to go out of something that you've maybe been strongly engaged in. Yeah? Something you've maybe even loved doing. And it's time for it to die so that a bigger self can be emerge. And so you feel the enthusiasm, the passion. You suddenly notice, oh, it's leached out. It's not there anymore. And it's like, yeah, and it's dying. And you can maybe struggle to get it back again. But that's not the way to go. The way to go is to trust it, We'll get to trust when we do the south. But it's a big trust process. There is something there, and not just scrabbling on to what you know. So this is the timeless. The East is the timeless. The South is the past. The West is the present. And the North is the future. So that's why I was talking about. You get this sense of a design, a pattern to your life. At these times when you're strongly in the East, it's like, suddenly there's illumination because it's something outside of time. I was watching a Siberian woman called Snow Raven, and you can look her up on YouTube. She gave this long interview, and she says amongst her people, which is strongly shamanic, they believe that everything is always happening at once. There is no like past, present, and future, and they're quite right. I mean, she puts it in terms of a belief, but really, it needs to be an experience. It's hard for us to experience that as human beings, but it's good as a belief, if you like. Yeah, the one that you can sort of work towards, use as a kind of pointer, while being honest that you don't experience it. I mean, I don't understand it. It's not something we can put in words once something is timeless. Okay, I also want to say something about teachers, because teachers are in the East. They're the bringers of light, the bringers of the East. They show it to us. They remind it of us. Teachers perform such a great service, and they've also got a bad name. They've always been at it one way or another, but they also bring gifts. And a good teacher needs to be ready to teach. The good teacher needs to be in good relationship with his own shadow. So he will have a shadow. He will have all those usual things that we have. Self-doubt, anxiety, anger, cruelty. We'll come to the shadow later. But we do have all those potentials within us as part of being human. And we don't like to admit it. We like to think we're a good person. We don't have things like that. And I sometimes say you can learn as much from the teacher's faults as you can from what he has to offer. So you go to a teacher, they usually do have some gifts. They have something to say, and you can learn from that. But usually, well, invariably is my experience, there's something going on around them. Yeah. And it's a matter of, well, can you live with that? Can you even see it? That's the first thing you learn is, can you even see their shadow? Can you see the way that they need everyone to love them? Or that they need everyone to believe what they believe? Or the way they demonize and cast out anyone who doesn't fit in, anyone who criticizes them, reduces it to their problem. All these sort of tricks go on, and you really learn from that. And actually, that can also be what saves you, because sometimes we go in there with a teacher, and yes, it helps, and our own kind of metaphysical connection strengthens. We learn to take it more seriously, but we also lose something. We get drawn into their orbit. We get drawn into that energy field around them, which has its own kind of rules and hierarchy that people will create. With the best will in the world, the best teacher in the world, people will do that around them. They will give their power away. And a good teacher will know how to hand it back and when to hand it back. People sometimes, they need to some degree. They need someone to look to, but you need to keep handing it back. And a good teacher will hand it back. There's plenty of teachers who won't. Of course, all of this is unspoken, and you won't win any friends if you talk about it. Yeah, because he's surrounded by followers. But when you can start to see it, you start to own your own power in a way that you've never owned it before, because you never truly owned it, or you couldn't have given it away to start with. So when you come out, it can be like magic. Yeah, you find your own power, your own existential independence.